Hello, can you hear me? If I can step back a bit. Okay, so just getting started. Again, we just made it into part 2, volume 1, part 2, finally last week. I'm going to do a test. Does this music in the background sound a little too loud? If it does, let me know in the chat. Is there any kind of delay or anything like that? Where are my chat friends at? Everybody in chat say yeah. I lit a candle. I'm here in my fortress of solitude, aka my bedroom. Dibble, thank you so much for the lurk. Lurkers are love, lurkers are life, as I like to say so crassly. Please, this is a very appropriate stream to be lurking in. I'm trying different music tonight, and I'm hoping that when I put this video on YouTube, I don't get a notification saying, I'm sorry, we can't release your video in Syria or North Korea because the music, copyright, which happened to me. Because I had a few bars from No One's Gonna Stop Us Now from my Phoenix Wright live stream from last week. Alright, so finished through part 1, volume 1, part 1. Finally, here we are. We are well on our way in this book. Music might be a little loud, actually. I turned the gain down on my mic. It's lower than it was last week. I want to ask a friend to pop on and see what they think. Get over here. Pardon me. Before I start reading, I just want to give a little refresher on kind of what was happening. And by doing that, I'm going to have to look back on the previous pages myself. Promise me, blah, 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 blah. Oh yes, I remember now. I remember now. Last time, Princess Maria was riding back and forth with her friend Julie, and she was excited because her sister-in-law and brother were going to be there. Brother Andre was going off to war, leaving his little wife with the downy lip, which they kept referencing. Don't know why. Dragonair, welcome back. Thank you. I really am. I'm so honored that I'm your favorite War and Peace live streamer. It means so much to me. I'm really hoping I can become everyone's favorite War and Peace live streamer. I want to become the most beloved War and Peace live streamer in the world. Goals. Hashtag goals. Oh, Dragonair, real quick, since you're here, unless you've lurked already, is the music too loud? Is the music too distracting? Does my voice overpower the music, or is it about on the same level? Should I turn the music down? You think it's a good volume? Okay, if the music ever gets to the point or the level where you can't make out what I'm saying, please let me know. Call it out. Say, hey, music's too loud. Turn it down. It's probably gonna get taken down by Twitch anyway. So, Where was I? Oh, yes. Andre went off to war, left his wife, his pregnant wife, with his father and sister. And Pierre just became the inheritor of his dad's estate, essentially. And yeah, that's kind of what's happening. That was what happened in the last part. I think I read 6 chapters left. This is Zora's Domain music. Yes, this is Zora's Domain music. I put on... It's Zelda, rainy Breath of the Wild towns, ambiance, 10 hours. I'm gonna use it, and I'm gonna try to post this to YouTube later, and Nintendo's gonna say... Nintendo's gonna copyright claim my video, probably, about War and Peace. Did I do that? Did I risk that? I mean, I'm not gonna be making money off it anyway. Who cares if they copyright strike it, right? I'm not even making money. So I'll just have to re-record this video. I like this music. It's so good. Okay. Volume 1, Part 2, Chapter 1. Here we go. In October 1805, Russian troops were busy occupying towns and villages in the Archduchy of Austria, with new regiments arriving all the time from Russia and settling near the fortress of Braunau, making life hard for the inhabitants on whom they were belated. Braunau was the headquarters of the commander-in-chief, General Kutuzov. On the 11th of October 1805, one of the newly arrived infantry regiments had halted a half-mile from Braunau, awaiting inspection by the commander-in-chief. The countryside and the general situation may have looked foreign with all those orchards, stone walls, tiled roofs, mountains in the distance, and foreign peasants gawking at the Russian soldiers, but the regiment looked just like any Russian regiment getting ready for inspection anywhere in the depths of Russia. Yesterday evening, on the last stage of the march, an order had been received. The commander-in-chief would inspect the regiment on the march. The wording of the order was not quite clear to the commanding officer, leaving open the question of whether or not the men should be in battle dress or in full dress uniform. It was decided after consultation with the battalion commanders to present the regiment in full dress. As they say, better to bow too low than not low enough. And after marching 25 miles, the men had been kept up all night mending and cleaning, while the staff officers checked numbers and gave orders. By morning, the regiment, a straggling shambles on the eve of the last march, looked like an ordinarily... By morning, the regiment, a straggling shambles on the eve of the last march, looked like an orderly formation of 2,000 men, everyone knowing his place and his duty, buttons firm and straps tight, everything spick and span and gleaming. And not only on the surface. If it should occur to the commander-in-chief to check underneath the uniform, he would see that every man was wearing a clean shirt, and in every knapsack he would find the regulation number of articles, the complete soldier's soap and sewing kit. There was only one thing that no one could be happy with: their footgear. Thanks, Kev. You think I'm fine playing Zelda music instead this week? I'll do it. Nintendo can just go without the 6 viewers that they would have gotten on their channel from having this music. Anyways, more than half the boots had holes in them. This was no fault of the commanding officer. In spite of repeated demands, the Austrian authorities had left him undersupplied, and the regiment had now marched over 700 miles. Whoa. The regiment had now marched over 700 miles. Gosh. 700 miles. I'm trying to picture this. That's like from here up to the northern... That's like from here to like Oregon. From LA to Oregon. About. Just about. Wow. They just marched that. I guess that's what they had to do back then. They didn't have like any transports or anything. Anyway, The regimental commander was an aging, ruddy-faced general with grizzled whiskers and eyebrows, rather portly, broader from front to back than from side to side. His uniform was brand new and still nicely creased, with great big golden epaulets which wouldn't lie down properly on his big shoulders. He had the air of a man who was happily fulfilling one of life's most solemn duties. He paraded up and down the front rank, and as he did so, his body quivered and his back was arched. Here was a general unmistakably proud of his regiment, happy with it and serving it with all his energy and spirit. Even so, his quivering walk seemed to suggest that his personal interests extended well beyond the military to include good society and the fair sex. "Well now, my good Mikhail Mitrich," he said, addressing one of the battalion commanders who had stepped forward with a smile on his face. They were clearly in good spirits, both of them. "Last night kept us on our toes, didn't it? Still, the regiment's not too bad now. Must be one or two worse than ours, eh?" Well, must be, what am I trying to say? Must be one or two worse than ours, eh? The major understood this ironical banter and he laughed. "Fit for the best parade ground, even Tsaritsyn Field." Tsaritsyn Field? Did I just look what this, Oh wait, that's the chapter summary. That is not what I was looking for. The Tsar's Field, soon to be renamed the Field of Mars, was in Petersburg. So, I guess it's a field where the Tsar would expect the troops. The Russian Tsar. The Tsaritsyn Field? What's that? Said the commander. Two riders had come into view. He's asking the exact same question I just asked, but not in reference to the same thing. One oof. Welcome to the live stream. I'm reading the Anthony Briggs translated version published by Penguin Classics. I'm on page 117. So if you're following along. Anyways. The major understood this ironical banter and he laughed. "Fit for the best parade ground, even Tsaritsyn Field." "What's that?" said the commander. Two riders had come into view down the road from the town where signalmen had been posted. They were an aide-de-camp with a Cossack riding along behind him. The aide had been sent from staff headquarters to confirm what had not been clearly stated in the previous order, that the commander-in-chief wished to inspect the regiment just as it was on the road, in greatcoats, carrying rucksacks, and with no special preparation. Yikes. So they didn't need to go all night long trying to prepare their best dress. That's such a disappointment. What a bummer. Anyways. A member of the Hofkriegsrath from Vienna had come to Kutuzov the previous day with a proposal, nay, a demand, that he proceed as soon as possible to join forces with the army of Archduke Ferdinand and General Mack. Kutuzov considered this inadvisable, and now, as part of his supporting argument, he wanted to demonstrate to the Austrian general the pitiable condition the troops were in after marching all the way from Russia. With this in mind, he intended to ride out and meet them on the road. The worse the regiment looked, the more delighted the commander-in-chief would be. The aide was not privy to all the details, but he did communicate the commander-in-chief's categorical insistence that the men be in greatcoats and marching order, and that anything other than that would incur his displeasure. So, actually, Katie Clown, hello, how's it going? Welcome to the stream. Actually, it's kind of funny. He wanted them to look bedraggled and haggard from their long. God, this is terrible. They're so proud of themselves for getting all dressed up for the inspection, and to the contrary, it's not what the actual guy wants. At these words, the commanding officer's head sank down. He gave a shrug and flung up his arms with some passion. "Now we've done it," he said. "Mikhail Mitrich, I told you. On the march, meant dressed in greatcoats," he rebuked the major. "Oh my God," he added, but then he stepped forward resolutely. "Company captains," he roared in a voice well used to bawling commands. "Sergeant majors? When will His Excellency be here?" he asked, turning to the aide with an expression of what? I gotta look up a word. obsequious, obs. It means to obedient or attentive to an excessive or servile degree. Let's see what the
Obsequious.
obsequious. I can read. Can read. What? Obsequious deference. Hey guys, welcome to the War and Peace live stream. I'm gonna get started again. Reset. I gotta replay this level. Now we've done it, he said. Mikhail Mitrich, I told you. On the march, men dressed in greatcoats. He rebuked the major. Oh my god, he added. But then he stepped forward resolutely. Company captains, he roared in a voice well used to bawling commands. Sergeant Majors? When will His Excellency be here? He asked, turning to the aide with an expression of obsequious deference that was really meant for the person he was referring to. It's an hour's time, I believe. Have we time to change? I couldn't say, General. The General went down among the ranks to supervise personally the change back into greatcoats. Captains rushed through their companies, sergeant majors worried about greatcoats that weren't quite right, and it took only a few minutes for the solid and silent rectangles to stir, straggle, and buzz with talk. Soldiers ran about everywhere, jerking their shoulders to lift up their rucksacks, pulling the straps over their heads, fishing out their greatcoats, and reaching up with their arms to pull down the sleeves. Half an hour later, everything was back to normal, but the rectangles were gray rather than black. The general set off with his quivering walk to parade himself before the regiment, scanning it from some way off. What the? Oh, what's all this? He roared, coming to a halt. Captain of the 3rd Company. Captain of the 3rd Company, report to the General. Company captain to the General. 3rd Company to the captain. Voices rang out down the ranks and an aide ran off to find the laggardly officer. When this urgent clamor reached its destination, having mixed up all the orders until eventually they were shouting, General to report to the 3rd Company. Oh my gosh, this is like a Mel Brooks comedy. Right here, Kev. Were we talking about Mel Brooks the other day? Oh yeah, we were talking about with the other. Okay, yeah. They calling out for the captain of the 3rd Company, and then when it plays telephone in the crowd. When this urgent clamor reached its destination, having mixed up all the orders until eventually they were shouting, General to report to the 3rd Company. The officer in question emerged from the rear of his company, and although he was an elderly man and no great runner, he managed a fair trot towards the General, tripping over his own toes as he came. The captain looked like a shifty schoolboy who had been told to run through some homework that he hadn't done. His face, already bright red in color, he was clearly no abstainer, now turned blotchy and his mouth twitched. That meant he drank. He drank alcohol. He was clearly no abstainer, now turned blotchy and his mouth twitched. The General looked him up and down as he ran forward, gasping and slowing down with every step. Do you want your men in women's dresses? What's the meaning of this? Roared the General, setting his jaw and pointing in the ranks of the 3rd Division to a soldier wearing a different colored greatcoat from everyone else's, the color of factory cloth. And where have you been? The Commander-in-Chief is expected, and you're not where you should be. Eh? I'll teach you to put your men in fancy dress for an inspection. Eh? The captain, never taking his eyes off his superior officer, pressed his 2 fingers harder and harder against the peak of his cap as if his only hope of safety lay in saluting as hard as he could. Well, why don't you say something? Who's that man dressed up like a Hungarian? The General's joke was a bitter one. Your Excellency. What do you mean, Your Excellency? I'll give you Your Excellency. You say it, but nobody knows what you mean. Your Excellency, that man is Private Dolokhov. He's been reduced to the ranks, the captain said softly. Are you sure he wasn't reduced to Field Marshal? If he's a private, he should be dressed like the others, regulation kit. Your Excellency, you gave him permission on the march. Permission? What permission? There you go, you're all the same, you youngsters, said the General, cooling down a little. Permission? A simple remark and you take it. Paused. Yes, you, take it. Well, what about it? He said, newly infuriated. Kindly make sure your men are properly turned out. And the General, looking round at his aide, walked his quivering way back to the regiment, patently delighted with his own show of displeasure, and now, as he walked through the ranks, looking for other excuses to blow his top. He tore a strip off one officer for having a dirty badge, and another because his column was out of line. Then he came to the third company. Call that standing to attention? What's that leg doing? That leg, what's it doing? The general roared with his long-suffering tone, and he was still 5 men short of Dolokhov, the man in the blue greatcoat. Dolokhov slowly straightened his leg and looked brazenly with his clear eyes at the general's face. Why are you wearing a blue coat? Get it off. Sergeant Major, change this man's coat. The filthy But he wasn't allowed to complete the word. General, I'm bound to obey orders, but not to put up with, Dolokhov spoke rapidly. No talking in the ranks. No talking there. No talking. Wait, Dolokhov. Is this the guy from... Is that the guy who was on the... Is that the guy drinking that bottle of rum? On the window ledge? In the Dancing Bear? From way back in part 1? Yep, Dolokhov. It's the guy with the bear. The guy who drank the bottle of rum on the windowsill. Okay, just wanted to get that right. General, I am bound to obey orders, but not to put up with... Dolokhov spoke rapidly. No talking in the ranks. No talking there. No talking. Not to put up with insults, Dolokhov persisted in a clear and confident voice. The eyes of General and Private met. The General demurred, angrily pulling down on his tight scarf. Be so kind as to change your coat, he said, and walked on. End of chapter. Chapter 2. He's coming, came the call from a signalman. The general, red in the face, ran to his horse, grasped the stirrup with trembling hands, swung himself up and across, settled down in the saddle, drew his sword, and with a look of pleasure and determination, opened one side of his mouth ready to shout. The regiment stirred itself like a bird settling its feathers, then all was still and silent. You making dinner, drinking like Dolokhov? What you drinking there? If you're drinking like Dolokhov, then you're drinking a rum. Attention! Roared the general in a voice that would shake souls, a voice of personal pleasure, of warning to the regiment, and of welcome to the approaching commander-in-chief. Towards them down the broad tree-lined country road came a tall blue Vienna's coach drawn by 6 horses at a smart trot, creaking on its springs. The general's entourage and an escort of Croats followed on behind the coach. At Kutuzov's side sat an Austrian general in a white uniform that looked out of place among the black Russian ones. The coach drew up before the regiment. Kutuzov and the Austrian general were chatting together in low voices, and Kutuzov gave a slight smile as he stepped down ponderously from the carriage step, for all the world as if these 2,000 men watching him and the other general with bated breath simply didn't exist. A command rang out. The regiment jerked into life and presented arms with a ringing clatter. Then, through the deathly silence, came the reedy voice of the commander-in-chief. The regiment roared its response. Long live His Excellency! 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 It's echoing. Then silence again. At first, Kutuzov stood rooted to one spot while the regiment changed formation. Then he began walking along the ranks, accompanied by the general in white and followed by his entourage. From the way the regimental commander saluted his commander-in-chief, staring fixedly at him, rigidly to attention and yet somehow cringing, from the way he bent forward eagerly as he followed the generals down the ranks, barely disguising his quivering walk, and jumped nervously at every word and movement of the commander-in-chief, it was evident that he was enjoying his role as a subordinate, even more than his role as a commander. Wow, that is one long sentence. That was a really long sentence there. Because of his strictness and keenness, the regiment was in fine fettle compared with others that had reached Braunau at the same time. The sick and the stragglers numbered no more than 217, and everything was in splendid order except the soldiers' boots. Kutuzov walked the ranks, stopping occasionally to say a few friendly words to officers he had known in the Turkish War, and sometimes to the other ranks. More than once, looking down at their boots, he shook his head sadly and pointed them out to the Austrian general as if to say that, although no one was to blame, he couldn't help noticing how bad things were. Each time this happened, the regimental commander sprang forward so as not to miss a single word the commander-in-chief might say about his men. Following on behind Kutuzov, near enough for the slightest whisper to carry, came the 20-strong entourage. These gentlemen were talking amongst themselves and occasionally laughing. Closest of all to the commander-in-chief walked a handsome adjutant. We just got the notification that Just When Thing DM is now live streaming on Discord, so go check them out. Closest of all to the commander-in-chief walked a handsome adjutant. It was Prince Andrei Bolkonsky. Alongside him was his comrade, Nesvitsky, a tall and very fat staff officer with a kind smile, a handsome face, and watery eyes. Nesvitsky could hardly help laughing at a dark-skinned hussar nearby. This officer, unsmiling and looking ahead doggedly with unblinking eyes, was goggling intently at the commander's back, mimicking his every movement. Each time the commanding officer quivered and bent forward, the hussar officer quivered and bent forward in exactly the same way. Nesvitsky was laughing and nudging the others so they didn't miss him playing the fool. Kutuzov walked at a slow, leisurely pace past the thousands of eyes almost straining out of their sockets in an effort to see him. When he got to the third company, he stopped abruptly. The entourage had not foreseen such a sudden stop and couldn't help pressing up close behind. So they all just kind of bunched up there. "Ah, Timokhin," said the commander-in-chief, recognizing the red-nosed captain who had been in trouble over the blue greatcoat. Uh-oh, he knows Dolokhov. It might have seemed impossible for anyone to stand as erect as Timokhin had done when the regimental commander had rebuked him. But now, finding himself spoken to by the commander-in-chief, the captain stretched himself to attention so rigidly that he seemed unlikely to survive the experience, should the commander-in-chief stay there much longer looking at him. For this reason, Kutuzov, seeing how things stood and wishing him nothing but good, turned away sharply. A flicker of a smile passed over Kutuzov's podgy, battle-scarred face. "Another old comrade from Ismail," he said. "A gallant officer. Are you pleased with him?" Kutuzov asked the general in command. And the general, oblivious to the mirror-like mimicry of the hussar behind him, quivered, pressed forward, and responded, "Yes, sir. Very pleased indeed." "We all have our little weaknesses," said Kutuzov, smiling as he walked away. He was a predilection for Bacchus, the god of wine. Bacchus? How do you pronounce his name? Give me the phonetic spelling. Oh. Okay. The commander was worried that this might be his fault, so he said nothing in reply. At that moment, the hussar officer noticed the red-nosed captain's face and his pulled-in stomach, and he mimicked them both so closely that Nesvitsky laughed out loud. Kutuzov turned round. The officer seemed able to do anything with his features. Even as Kutuzov turned around, he managed to pull another funny face before assuming the gravest expression of innocence and respect. Crescent Roll, welcome! Let's see, you missed so much. Let's see, what did you miss? Oh, the beginning of part 2. And, Pierre's dad died, the count died last time, and he inherited his father's fortune. Prince Andrei is now off to war. He dropped off his wife, his little pregnant wife with the downy lip, at his father's place and his sister's place. So she's pregnant and alone there while her husband's gone off to war. Yeah, different music today. Trying some Zelda music, hoping I don't get copyright strike. Anyways, yes, moving right along. Now all the soldiers are getting inspected with a Russian commander-in-chief and a Austrian general. The third company was the last one, and Kutuzov paused for a moment as if he was trying to remember something. Prince Andrei stepped forward and spoke quietly to him in French. Sir, you asked me to remind you about Dolokhov, the officer in this regiment who was reduced to the ranks. Where is Dolokhov? Asked Kutuzov. Dolokhov, who had by now changed into a gray private soldier's coat, didn't wait to be called. The slim figure of the fair-haired soldier with his clear blue eyes stepped out of the front rank, marched up to the commander-in-chief, and presented arms. Any complaint? Asked Kutuzov with a slight frown. This is Dolokhov, sir, said Prince Andrei. It's all going down, yep. Ah, said Kutuzov. Well, let this be a lesson to you. Do your duty as a soldier. The Emperor is merciful. I shan't forget you if you do well. Okay, quick refresher. Dolokhov was the guy in the earlier parts of the book who was sitting on the windowsill drinking rum, challenged some Englishman that he could drink a whole bottle of rum while sitting on a windowsill on the second floor of a building. And he's the one who helped Pierre capture that, or take that dancing bear cub and strap it to the back of a police officer, which is why I think he's now been relegated to a private in the army. So, was an officer, I guess, or I don't know. The clear blue eyes looked at the commander-in-chief just as brazenly as at the regimental commander. They seemed almost to rip away the veil of convention that set the commander-in-chief so far above the common soldier. I ask only one favor, your most high excellency, he said in his loud, confident voice, not hurrying his words. And that is a chance to atone for my offense and prove my devotion to His Majesty the Emperor and to Russia. Kutuzov turned away. His eyes lit up with the same flicker of a smile with which he had turned away from Captain Timokhin. He turned away and frowned as if to indicate that everything Dolokhov had said to him, and anything that he could say, was old hat, too tedious for words and not at all what was needed. He turned away and walked off towards the coach. Not the couch. They didn't arrive on a couch. They arrived in a coach. The regiment broke down by companies, and the men set off for their appointed quarters at no great distance from Braunau, where they hoped to find new boots and clothes and have good rest after so long on the march. The soldiers had been marching for 700 miles. They had finally arrived at their destination, I think. Don't hold it against me, Prokhor Ignatich, will you? Said the regimental commander, overtaking the third company and riding up to Captain Timokhin, who was leading it. The general's face was beaming with irrepressible delight following such a successful inspection. It's all in the Tsar's service. You can't, sometimes you have to be a bit hard. I'm the first to apologize. You know me. He said how pleased he was. And he held out a hand to the captain. Please, General, as if I would, answered the captain, his nose redder than ever. He smiled, and his smile showed that his two front teeth were missing. They had been knocked out by a rifle butt in Ismail. In a previous war. Oh, until Dolokhov to rest easy, I shan't forget him. By the way, I've been meaning to ask, what is he doing? How's he getting on? He is diligent in the performance of his duty, sir, but he can be temperamental, said Timokhin. What do you mean temperamental? Asked the general. Different things on different days, sir, said the captain. Sometimes he's sensible and intelligent and good-natured. Then he can be like a wild animal. When we were in Poland, I should tell you, he all but killed a Jew. Yes, I see, said the general. Still, you have to go easy on a young fellow when he's in trouble. He is well connected, you know. I think you should, Yes, sir, said Timokhin, his smile indicating that he knew what was required of him. Very well, then, very well. The general went to find Dolokhov in the ranks and reined in his horse. Come the first action, you should get your epaulets back, he said to him. Dolokhov looked around but said nothing. The sardonic smile that played about his mouth stayed the same. Well, that's all right then, the general went on. Vodka all around. On me, he added, loud enough for the soldiers to hear. My thanks to you all. God be praised. He galloped past that company and on to the next one. He's a good man, you know. Worth serving with, said Timokhin to a junior officer at his side. King of Hearts, that's the only word for him, said the officer with a laugh, that being the general's nickname. The officer's buoyant mood following the inspection was caught by the soldiers. The company marched along merrily with soldiers' voices chattering away on all sides. Who was it said Kutuzov's blind in one eye? Well, he is, blind as they come. Nay, boys, he's got better eyes than you. Soon spotted our boots and leg bands, didn't he? Listen, mate, when he looked at my legs, I says to myself, and what about that Austrian bloke with him? Looked like they chalked him all over, white as flour. I bet they strips him down and cleans him like he does the guns. Why is he now writing it in this weird, like, interesting broken English? Hey, Fedya, did he say anything about when it all starts? You were nearer than me. Somebody said Bonaparte's here in Braunau. In Braunau? Rubbish, come off it. It's the Prussians what's revolting now. The Austrians, they got to put 'em down. When that's done, that's when there's a war with Bonaparte. And your mate says Bonaparte's here now? Must be stupid. You keep your ears open. Blasted quartermasters, look, 5th Company's turning off into that village. They'll have their porridge cooked and we're nowhere near. Give us a bit of your biscuit, old man. What? Did you give me any baccy? Baccy? Yeah, B-A-C-C-Y. Give me any of that.
Backy.
Backy. Did you give me any of your it's short for tobacco. Did you give me any of your tobacco yesterday? Give us a bit of your biscuit, old man. What? Did you give me any backy yesterday? See what I mean? Go on, then. You can have a bit. We ought to have a halt here, or we'll have to do another 3 or 4 miles with nothing inside us. Wasn't it great when them Germans gave us a lift in their carts? Gotta move on then, didn't we? This is just a bunch of generic soldier prattle that's happening as they're marching further into the town after their inspection. So none of it needs to make sense. Please don't try to keep track of all these different characters now, because I'm certainly not. I'm just reading out loud. But listen, boys, the folks around here be a weird lot. Up to now, it's been all Poles and such like, all under the Russian crown. From now on, it's all Germans, me boy. Singers to the front, came the captain's call, and a couple of dozen men went forward with various ranks. The drummer, who was also the leader, turned round to face the choir, waved an arm, and struck up a long, meandering soldier song beginning, As the morning sun was dawning, and ending, Therefore, boys, we march to glory, all with Father Kamensky. This song had been composed in Turkey, and now it was being sung in Austria, except that instead of Kamensky, they sang Kutuzov. They just replaced the general's name, or their commander-in-chief. Rapping out the last words in military fashion with a downward sweep of his arms as if he was throwing something on the ground, the drummer, a lean, handsome soldier about 40 years old, looked grimly at the soldiers' choir and frowned. Then, satisfied that everyone was looking at him, he made as if he was delicately raising an unseen treasure over his head with both hands, held it there for a few seconds, and then suddenly hurled it down in one furious movement. Ah, the bosom of my cottage. And 24 voices came in with the next line. My new cottage. And the wooden spoon player, in spite of all his accoutrements, leapt smartly to the front and walked backwards facing the company. Wooden spoon player? Okay, this is a weird mental image I've got now. Literally a wooden spoon player. And he's marching. He's marching. Okay. They're singing songs, and a wooden spoon player is leading the soldiers in. The soldiers stepped out to the rhythm of the song, swinging their arms and instinctively coming into step. Suddenly, from behind the company came the sound of wheels, the crunching of springs, and the clattering of horses' hooves. Kutuzov and his entourage were returning to the town. The commander-in-chief gave a signal for the soldiers to carry on, and soon he and all his followers were enjoying the singing, the antics of the dancing soldier, and the happy men marching on so smartly. There, in the second row from the right flank, which the carriage had to drive past, one figure stood out, the blue-eyed soldier, Dolokhov. marching to the rhythm of the song with a special bounce and panache, and looking at the faces of those who were driving by with apparent pity for anyone who was not marching with them then and there in the ranks. The young hussar officer in Kutuzov's suite, Zurkov, who had been mimicking the general, dropped back from the carriage and rode up to Dolokhov. Zurkov had at one time belonged to the wild set in Petersburg, which had Dolokhov as its leader. He had come across Dolokhov outside Russia as a common soldier and had not seen fit to recognize him. But now, following Kutuzov's conversation with the disgraced officer, he addressed him with all the joviality of an old friend. "My dear fellow, how are you?" he asked through all the singing, while maneuvering his horse to keep pace with the marching soldiers. "How am I?" Dolokhov answered coldly. "Can't you see?" The lively song gave a particular thrust to Zurkov's free and easy cheerfulness as he spoke, and to the deliberate iciness of Dolokhov's responses. "Well, how did you get on with the officers?" "Not bad. They're good fellows. How did you manage to worm your way onto the staff?" "I was seconded, just for a spell." They were silent. And then there's a singing part. I'm not going to sing for you. Hope that's okay. Please don't. Please don't unfollow. No, I took my hawk and let him leave from my right arm from my sleeve. I'm not going to sing. That was it. 2 lines. No, it's not okay. The song rang out, automatically arousing feelings of brightness and joy. No doubt they would have had a different kind of conversation if they hadn't been talking about against the singing. So the frivolity of their soldiers singing is actually probably benefiting the Zurkov's conversation with Dolokhov. "Have the Austrians really been beaten?" asked Dolokhov. "They keep damn well saying so." "I'm glad," is Dolokhov's clear, snappy reply, as demanded by the song. "I say, why don't you drop round one evening? We'll have a game of cards," said Zurkov. "Have you got plenty of money then?" "Well, do come." "I can't. I've sworn not to. No drinking or betting till I'm promoted." "Oh well, come the first action. We'll see what happens." Another pause. "Well, drop by if you need anything. Someone at staff headquarters can always help." Dolokhov grinned. "Don't worry. What I want, I'm not going to ask for. I'll get it myself." "Yes, well, me too. Goodbye. Keep well." Go, fun flyer, ever higher, to your country far away. Zurkov put spurs to his horse, which reared on its hind legs 2 or 3 times in great excitement as if it couldn't decide which foreleg to lead off with. Then it galloped past the company and caught up with the carriage, still moving to the rhythm of the song. End of chapter. You'll play the wooden spoon while I sing? If you were here right now and you had wooden spoons and you started to play, I would probably have to sing. I would have to sing. Unfortunately, that's not happening, and I don't see it happening anytime soon, so yeah. I need a drink of water. Break time. Drink your water, kids and adults. Yes, I'm very thirsty. Dragonair. Yeah. Chapter 3. Once back from the review, Kutuzov took the Austrian general into his private room and summoned his aide, asking for certain papers concerning the condition of the newly arrived troops and some letters received from the Archduke Ferdinand, who was in command of the advance army. Prince Andrei Polkonsky came into the commander-in-chief's room with a Whoa. Yeah, Dragonair, please. Yeah, sounds good. Prince Andrei Polkonsky came into the commander-in-chief's room with the necessary documents. Kutuzov and the Austrian representative of the Hofkriegsrath. Okay. Show this word to you, and hopefully some. You're right. This book has a lot of fun words. Oh boy. I don't know what that means. A representative of the Hofkriegsgrath. We're sitting over a plan that, man, I sound like a There's not an easy answer for this. It's like a council, a war council. It's a war council. Okay. Oh yes, said Kutuzov, looking around at Bolkonsky and using the phrase as an invitation for his aide to stand with them. Then he continued his conversation. I have only one thing to say, General, said Kutuzov, using French of such agreeable elegance and persuasiveness and persuasive intonation that the listener was obliged to concentrate on each carefully enunciated word, and Kutuzov was clearly not averse to the sound of his own voice. All I can say is that if this were a matter of my personal preference, the desire of His Majesty, Emperor Francis, would have been fulfilled long ago. I would have lost no time in joining the Archduke. I give you my word that for me personally to hand over the high command of the army to more knowledgeable and experienced generals, which Austria has in abundance, and to cast off such a heavy responsibility, this for me personally would be a relief. But circumstances are sometimes too much for us, General. And Kutuzov smiled with an expression that seemed to say, you have every right to disbelieve me, and I don't care, and I don't much care whether you do or you don't, but you have no grounds for saying that out loud, and that's it. Wow, he said all that in his smile. The Austrian general looked unhappy, but he dared not adopt the wrong tone with Kutuzov. On the contrary, he snapped with a petulance that belied the meaning of his unctuous words. On the contrary, the participation of your most high excellency in our joint enterprise is highly appreciated by his Majesty. But we do believe that the present delay is depriving the gallant Russian troops and their commander-in-chief of the laurels they are accustomed to winning in the field. He concluded a sentence obviously prepared in advance. Kutuzov bowed, still smiling the same smile. But I am equally certain to judge by the last letter with which His Highness the Archduke Ferdinand has honored me, he said, and I put it to you indeed that the Austrian troops under the command of so skillful a leader as General Mack have already achieved total victory and have no further need of our assistance. The general frowned. Though there had been no definite news of an Austrian defeat, there was too much circumstantial evidence confirming this as an unpleasant possibility, and that made Kutuzov's assertion of an Austrian victory sound rather like a sneer. But Kutuzov's brief smile contained the same suggestion as before, that he had every right to say what he did. As it happened, the last letter he had received from the army of General Mack had informed him of victory and of the army's most favorable strategic position. Hand me that letter, said Kutuzov to Prince Andrei. See here? And Kutuzov, with a sardonic smile playing about the corners of his mouth, read out in German for the benefit of the Austrian general this excerpt from the letter of the Archduke Ferdinand. We have fully concentrated force of nearly 70,000 men, and therefore stand ready to attack and defeat the enemy in the event of his crossing the Lech. Since we already hold Ulm, we are in a position to maintain the advantage of commanding both banks of the Danube, and therefore would be able to, at a moment's notice, should the enemy decide not to cross the Lech, to cross the Danube. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Let me reread this. We have a fully concentrated force of nearly 70,000 men, and therefore stand ready to attack and defeat the enemy in the event of his crossing the Lech. Is it the...
Lech River.
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 It sounded British, and you know the British people are smart. So it must be the right way to pronounce it. I'm gonna try this for a third time. If I die during this time, it's game over. 3 lives and you're gone. We have a fully concentrated force of nearly 70,000 men, and therefore stand ready to attack and defeat the enemy in the event of his crossing the Lech. Since we already hold Ulm, we are in a position to maintain the advantage of commanding both banks of the Danube, and therefore would be at a moment's notice, should the enemy decide not to cross the Lech, to cross the Danube ourselves and fall upon their line of communications, recross the river downstream, and frustrate the enemy's intentions should he decide to mount a mass attack against our faithful ally. On this account, we shall wait with confidence the full readiness of the Imperial Russian army, whereupon we shall easily proceed together in preparing for the enemy the fate which he so richly deserves. Kutuzov gave a heavy sigh as he finished reading the extract, and he turned sympathetically to the representative of the Hofkriegsrath, eyeing him closely. Thank you all for sticking with me today. For those who are still here. Ahem. But as you well know, Your Excellency, it is always wise to prepare for the worst, said the Austrian general, clearly eager to stop playing around and get down to business. He glanced with displeasure at the adjutant. Excuse me, General, Kutuzov interrupted him, and he too turned to Prince Andrei. My dear fellow, I want you to collect all our intelligence reports from Kozlovsky. Here are 2 letters from Count Nostitz, and here's one from His Highness the Archduke Ferdinand, and there's all these others, he said, handing him several documents. Take all this and write me a memorandum, a note in your neatest French clearly presenting all the information we received about any movements of the Austrian army. Do that, please, and then show it to His Excellency. Prince Andrei gave a nod which indicated that he had understood from the outset not only what was said, but also what Kutuzov would have liked to say. He gathered up the papers, gave a single bow, and padded across the carpeted floor and out into the reception room. Although it was not long since Prince Andrei had left Russia, he had changed a great deal during that time. His facial expression and the way he moved and walked showed barely a trace of his former affectation and languid boredom. He had the air of a man too absorbed in enjoyable and fascinating work to think about making an impression on other people. His face showed greater contentment with himself and those around him. His smile was easier, a warmer charm shone in his eyes. General Kutuzov, whom he had caught up with in Poland, had received him very graciously and promised not to forget him. He gave him preference over the other adjutants and took him to Vienna, entrusting him with more important commissions. From Vienna, Kutuzov wrote as follows to his old comrade, Prince Andrei's father. Your son, with his knowledge, spirit, and attention to detail, has the potential to become an outstanding officer. I consider myself lucky to have such an able subordinate. On Kutuzov's staff, among his fellow officers and in the army generally, Prince Andrei was what he had been in Petersburg society, a man with 2 completely different reputations. Some people, the minority, considered him a cut above themselves and everybody else. They expected a lot from him. They listened to him, admired and imitated him, and with these people, Prince Andrei was open and agreeable. Others, the majority, didn't like him at all, seeing him as a petulant, aloof, and thoroughly unpleasant. But Prince Andrei knew enough to ensure that even these people treated him with respect and sometimes a certain awe. He left Kutuzov's room and walked across the anteroom to his comrade, the duty adjutant Kozlovsky, who was sitting by the window reading. What is it, Prince? Queried Kozlovsky. I've been told to write a note saying why we're not going on. Well, why aren't we? Prince Andrei shrugged. No news from Mac? Asked Kozlovsky. No. If he really had been beaten, we would have heard by now. Quite likely, said Prince Andrei, moving towards the door. But he was confronted on the way out by a tall man who walked into the anteroom and slammed the door behind him. The new arrival was an Austrian general in a long coat with a black cloth around his head and the Order of Maria Theresa around his neck. Prince Andrei stopped short. "The Commander-in-Chief, Kutuzov?" asked the general, speaking quickly with a rough German accent. He looked to both sides and walked straight on to the door of the private room. "The Commander-in-Chief is busy," said Kozlovsky, hurrying over to the unknown general and barring his way to the door. "Who shall I say has arrived?" The newcomer looked down on the diminutive Kozlovsky, apparently surprised not to be recognized. "The Commander-in-Chief is busy," Kozlovsky repeated calmly. The general's face contorted, his lips twitching and trembling. He took out a notebook, jotted something down in pencil, tore the page out and handed it to Kozlovsky, and then strode swiftly to the window, where he threw himself into a small chair and looked around at the others as though wondering why they were watching him. Then he looked up and thrust his neck out as though about to speak, only to start humming with a kind of forced nonchalance, a strange sound which he snapped off almost immediately. The door of the private room opened, and there was Kutuzov in the doorway, as though fleeing from some danger. The general with the bandaged head bent forward and sped towards him on spindly legs. "You see before you the unfortunate Mac," he managed to say in French, his voice breaking. Kutuzov's face, as he stood there in the doorway, remained impassive for a few moments. Then a wrinkle rippled across it like a wave and left his forehead smooth. He bowed his head respectfully, closed his eyes, ushered Mac in without a word, and closed the door behind him. So the rumor that had been going around, that the Austrians had been defeated and the whole army had surrendered at Ulm, had turned out to be true. Within half an hour, aides had been dispatched in every direction with orders to the effect that the Russian troops, which had so far been inactive, would soon have to confront the enemy. Prince Andrei was one of those few staff officers with a genuine interest in the overall progress of the war. On observing Mac and learning the details of his downfall, he saw immediately that the campaign was half lost. He could sense the enormous difficulty which now faced the Russian troops and imagine what lay ahead of them. He could also foresee the part that he personally would have to play. He couldn't resist a thrill of real pleasure at the thought of the arrogant Austrians suffering such humiliation and the prospect of, perhaps in less than a week, witnessing, even taking part in, an encounter between the Russians and the French, the first since Suvorov's day. But he was afraid of Bonaparte's genius. This man might turn out to be stronger than all the brave Russian troops put together, and yet at the same time he couldn't bear to think of his hero being disgraced. Excited and unnerved by these thoughts, Prince Andrei decided to go to his room and write to his father, which he did every day. But in the corridor, he met his roommate, Nesvitsky and Zherkov the clown. As usual, they had found something to laugh at. Is that you humming, Kevin? Like General Mac? Nice. I mean, what are you going to do when your army you're leading is defeated and surrendered to Napoleon Bonaparte, and you have to go report to the rest of the Austrians? "What are you looking so miserable about?" asked Nesvitsky, noticing Prince Andrei's pale face with its gleaming eyes. "There's nothing to celebrate," answered Bolkonsky. Just as Prince Andrei encountered Nesvitsky and Zherkov, down the corridor towards them came the two Austrian generals who had arrived the previous night, Strauch and an attaché charged with provisioning the Russian army, and the Hofkriegsrath representative. There was plenty of room in the wide corridor for the generals to pass the three officers with something to spare. Nevertheless, Zherkov shoved Nesvitsky to one side and called out breathlessly, "Mind your backs, please! Make way! Stand aside!" The generals walked on, looking as if they would have liked to avoid any embarrassing display of respect, but Zherkov the clown suddenly smirked with what seemed to be an uncontrollable glee. "Your Excellency," he said in German, moving forward and addressing the Austrian general. "My compliments to you, sir." He began bowing and scraping awkwardly like a child getting his legs mixed up at a dancing lesson. The Hofkriegsrath man looked at him sharply, but, detecting something serious behind the silly smirk, he couldn't refuse him a moment's attention. He frowned with concentration to show that he was listening. "My compliments indeed, sir, on General Mac's arrival. He seems to be well, just a bit of trouble up here, he added, tapping his head with an even broader smile. The general's frown deepened. He turned away and hurried off. Stupid boy, he said angrily a few steps further on. Nesvitsky roared with laughter and threw his arms around Prince Andrei, but Bolkonsky, turning even paler, pushed him away with a furious glare and turned to Zherkov. The nervous tension brought on by the sight of Mac, the news of his defeat, and the thought of what the Russian army was in for expressed itself in a furious reaction to Zherkov's tasteless joke. Sir, if you insist on acting like a buffoon, he began cuttingly with a slight trembling of the jaw, it is not for me to stop you. But if you dare play the fool once more in my presence, I'll teach you how to behave. Nesvitsky and Zherkov were so taken aback by this outburst that they gazed in silence at Bolkonsky with wide-open eyes. Huh? I only gave them my compliments, said Zherkov. I'm not joking, sir. Please be silent, Bolkonsky roared, and taking Nesvitsky by the arm, he walked away from Zherkov, leaving him lost for words. I say, come on, old fellow, said Nesvitsky, trying to soothe him. Come on, said Prince Andrei, pausing, still very excited. Listen, either we are officers serving Tsar and country, rejoicing in allied successes and grieving together in defeat, or we're just hired servants who have no interest in our master's business. 40,000 men massacred, and the allied army destroyed, and you think that's funny? He said, choosing his phrases carefully in French to emphasize what he was saying. It may be all right for a stupid young idiot like that friend of yours, but it's not all right for you. Not for you. Schoolboys joke like that, Prince Andrei added, going into Russian but saying the word with a French accent. He had noticed that Zherkov was still within hearing and waited for some response from the cornet. But no, he turned away from them and walked out of the corridor. End of chapter. Like a little nightingale. Oh. Just checking. Okay. Chapter 4. The Pavlograd Hussars were stationed 2 miles from Braunau. The squadron in which Nikolai Rostov was serving as an ensign was belated on a German village Salzenek. The squadron commander, Captain Denisov, known throughout the cavalry division as Vaska, had been given the best quarters, and Ensign Rostov was sharing with him, as he had done ever since he had joined the regiment in Poland. On the 8th of October, the day when headquarters was shocked out of its complacency by the news of Mac's defeat, life in the squadron had been going smoothly in its old routine. Denisov had spent all night losing at cards, and was still out when Rostov came back early that morning from a foraging expedition. Rostov rode up to the steps in his cadet's uniform, reined in his horse, swung one leg over the saddle with the ease of a fit young man, stood up in the stirrup for a second as though reluctant to let go of the horse, and then leapt down and called for an orderly. Ah, Bondarenko, my dear fellow, he said to the hussar who came rushing up to his horse. Give him a walk, there's a good fellow, he said with the kind of cheery familiarity which good-hearted young people show to everyone when they are in a happy mood. Yes, sir, answered the Ukrainian boy with a cheerful toss of his head. Mind you give him a decent walk. Another hussar had rushed up by now, but Bondarenko had already thrown the reins off the snaffle bit over the horse's head. The young cadet was obviously a good tipper, well worth working for. Rostov? I'm even second guessing that I'm saying his name right. Rostov stroked the horse on its neck and flank and then paused for a while on the steps. First rate, what a horse he's going to be, he said to himself with a smile. Holding his saber up, he ran up the steps with clattering spurs. The German on whom they were belayed, wearing his thick shirt and pointed cap, and holding a fork which he was using for mucking out, glanced out from the cowshed. His face lit up when he saw Rostov. With a cheerful smile and a quick wink, he greeted him in German. "Good morning, a very good morning to you." He seemed to take pleasure in welcoming the young man. "You're out working early," said Rostov, also in German, with a happy, friendly smile that never left his eager face. "Hurrah for the Austrians! Hurrah for the Russians! Long live the Emperor Alexander," he said, using phrases that had often been said before by the German, who now came out of his cowshed, laughing, pulled off his cap and waved it above his head, shouting, "And long live that whole world!" Wait, and long live the whole world. Rostov did the same with his cap and cried out laughingly, "Yes, long live the whole world!" There's no reason for either of them to celebrate. The German mucking out, or Rostov coming back from foraging for hay, but these two people beamed at each other in sheer delight and brotherly love, wagging their heads at one another to show mutual affection, and then they went off smiling, the German to his cowshed, and Rostov to the rough cottage he was sharing with Denisov. "Where's your master?" he asked Lavrushka, Denisov's valet, and a well-known rogue. "He's been out all night. Must have been losing," answered Lavrushka. "I know him by now. If he wins, he comes home early and tells us all about it. If he's not back by morning, that means that he's lost. He'll be furious when he does come home. Shall I serve some coffee?" "Yes, please." 10 minutes later, Lavrushka brought in the coffee. "He's coming now," said he. "There'll be trouble." Through the window, Rostov could see Denisov returning home, a small figure of a man, red in the face with sparkling black eyes, wayward black mustaches, and tousled hair. His long cloak was unfastened, his baggy breeches hung down in folds, and his hussar's cap had slid down the back of his head, all crumpled. A picture of gloom with downcast eyes, he walked to the steps. "Lavrushka!" he yelled in a loud, angry voice that emphasized his speech impediment. "Come on, get it off, man!" "Yes, that's what I am doing," came Lavrushka's voice in reply. "Oh, you're up then," said Denisov, coming into the room. "Ages ago," said Rostov. "I've been out foraging, and I've seen Fräulein Mathilde." Mathilde? Is that how you pronounce that name? Mathilde. Mathilde? Mathilde? Matilda. Maybe that's what it... Okay, anyways, I'm going to say Matilda. Oh, okay. "Ages ago," said Rostov, "I've been out foraging, and I've seen Fräulein Matilda." "Have you?" "And I've been losing, brother, all night long, like a son of a bitch," cried Denisov. "What luck! Have you seen anything like it? Since the moment you left, no luck at all. Hey, you, bring me some tea." Denisov's face wrinkled into something like a smile, which showed off his small, strong teeth, and he began working with the short fingers of both hands to ruffle the dense, tangled thicket of his tousled black hair. "Devil knows why I had to take on that Wotten Wet," one of the officers was nicknamed Rat, he said, rubbing his forehead and face with both hands. "Can you believe it? He never dealt me a decent card, not one, not one, not one." Denisov accepted the lighted pipe that was handed to him, squeezed it in his fist, tapped it on the floor with a shower of sparks, and carried on shouting, "Let you win straight, and he wins the doubles. Me straight, him doubles." He scattered more sparks. The pipe broke, and he threw it away. Then he paused and turned his gleaming black eyes sharply on Rostov. "If only there was some women, but here you have a drink, and then there's nothing else to do. What we need is some fighting, and soon. Hey, who's that?" he called, turning towards the door, hearing someone stop with a clattering of thick boots and clinking spurs, followed by a polite cough. "Quartermaster," called out Lavrushka. Denisov wrinkled his face up more than ever. "Oh, damn," he said, flinging down a purse with a few gold coins in it. "Rostov, dear boy, would you count how much is left and shove the purse under my pillow?" he said, and went out to see the quartermaster. Rostov took the money and began to sort it automatically into 2 heaps, old coins and new ones, which he then began to count. Why does bread have to be so good? I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know. I had that raisin bread today and it was so good. Raisin bread, toast, and cinnamon raisin bread with butter. Toasted. So good. So good. Yes, I'm off keto for now. I'll get back on it. He scattered more blah blah blah. Whatever was I? Oh yeah, oh yeah. I like reading for this guy, the speech impediment guy. Oh, Telyanin, good morning to you. Cleaned me white out last night, he could hear Denisov saying in the other room. Where were you? At Bykov's? At the rats? I knew it, said another person's reedy voice. And into the room walked Lieutenant Telyanin, a small fellow officer. Rostov Excuse me. Pardon me. Rostov stuffed the purse under the pillow and went to shake the damp little hand that was offered. For some reason, Telyanin had been transferred from the guards just before the regiment had marched off. He had behaved well enough with them, but no one liked him, and Rostov in particular couldn't abide him or even manage to hide his unreasonable dislike of this officer. Well now, my young cavalryman, how are you getting on with my little rook? Little Rook was his young horse, well broken in for riding, that Telyanin had sold to Rostov. The lieutenant never looked anyone in the eye when he was speaking. His own eyes were continually darting from one object to another. I saw you out on him today. Oh, not bad at all. He's a good ride, answered Rostov. But the horse for which he had paid 700 rubles wasn't really worth half that amount. He's limping a bit on the left foreleg, he added. At least that's what I might be doing. It's like the most extreme form of being off keto. I'm just eating bread all week. I bought like 3 loaves of bread. I'm just gonna sit, park myself on the couch and eat bread. I'm gonna watch HBO Max and eat bread. Anyways. He's limping a bit on the left foreleg, he added. Got a cracked hoof. It's nothing. I'll teach you. I'll show you how to put a rivet in. I'd be glad if you would, said Rostov. I'll show you. I'll show you. Nothing secret about it. But you'll be glad you bought that horse. You're right. To entertain themselves, one person would read aloud in the room, and the other people would just be sitting on the like chairs in the parlor, just eating loaves of bread, like baguettes, or whatever they had prepared that day. It was like the thing to do in most social circles. Like a salon. It would be people gathering around, giving speeches and chatting, while everyone had a giant loaf of bread in their hand. Russian loaves. Good. Oh, wait. I got a cracked hoof. It's nothing. I'll teach you. I'll show you how to put a rivet in it. I'd be glad if you would, said Rostov. I'll show you. I'll show you. Nothing secret about it. But you'll be glad you bought that horse. Good. I'll have him brought around, said Rostov, anxious to get rid of Telyanin. And he went out to arrange for them to get the horse. Outside, Denisov was squatting on the threshold with a new pipe, facing the quartermaster, who was reporting to him. Seeing Rostov, Denisov screwed up his face, pointed a thumb over his shoulder towards the room where Telyanin was sitting, frowned and shuddered with revulsion. He's like, oh. No one can stand the Telyanin guy. I love that. I mean, I don't. It's very... Never mind. Ugh, I can't stand that fellow, he said, ignoring the quartermaster. Rostov shrugged as if to say, neither can I, but what can you do? He gave his instructions and went back into Telyanin, who was sitting as before, in the same languid pose, rubbing his little white hands together. Some people are just too awful for words, thought Rostov as he entered. Well, have you ordered them to fetch the horse? Said Telyanin, getting up and looking around casually. Yes. Well, you come too. I just dropped in to ask Denisov about yesterday's order. Have you got it, Denisov? No, not yet. Where are you off to? I'm going to show this young man how to shoe a horse, said Telyanin. They went out, down the steps and into the stable. The lieutenant showed Rostov how to fix a rivet, and then went off to his own quarters. When Rostov got back, there on the table stood a bottle of vodka and some sausage. Dinozov was sitting there and his pen was scratching across a sheet of paper. He looked glumly into Rostov's face. I am writing to her, he said. He leant his elbows on the table, pen in hand, and was obviously so delighted at the prospect of speaking much faster than he could write that he gave Rostov the benefit of his whole letter. You see, my dear fellow, he said, we are asleep until we fall in love. We are the children of dust and ashes. But once you have love, you are a god, as pure as on the first day of creation. Who's that? Send him away, damn it, I've no time, he bawled at Lavrushka, who, nothing daunted, went up to him. Who do you expect? You invited him. It's the quartermaster. Come for his money. Dinozov scowled and seemed as if he would say something but didn't. Rotten business altogether, he said to himself. How much was there left in that purse? He asked Rostov. 7 new, 3 old. Well, don't just stand there like a big wagdoll. Bring in the quartermaster, Dinozov shouted to Lavrushka. Dinozov, please, here's some money. I've got plenty, said Rostov, reddening. I don't like borrowing from friends. I really don't, growled Dinozov. Dinozov, this is literally how he's written. I don't like borrowing from friends. I really don't, growled Dinozov. But if you won't accept my money from me, a comrade, I'll be offended. I've really got plenty, repeated Rostov. Oh no, and Dinozov went over to the bed to get the purse out from under the pillow. Where did you put it, Rostov? Under the bottom pillow. Well, it's not there. Dinozov threw both the pillows down on the floor. No purse. Well, I'm blessed. Hang on, you must have dropped it, said Rostov, picking the pillows up one at a time and shaking them. He pulled the quilt off and shook it out. Still no purse. I've forgotten something? No, I remember thinking you'd be sleeping on a secret treasure, said Rostov. I did put the purse there. Where's it gone? He turned to Lavrushka. I was never in the room. It must be where you put it. Well, it isn't. That's you all over, throwing things about and forgetting where they are. Look in your pockets. No, if I hadn't thought of it like a secret treasure, said Rostov. But I do remember where I put it. I'm going to spontaneously combust. So he's written like Poshul. Yeah, actually, you know what's funny, Kevin? I literally was thinking of Poshul. I was literally just thinking of Poshul. Spontaneously combust. Did I get, Oh, he's hosting me. Thank you so much for the host, Purple Mario. I didn't even hear that notification. Much for the host. I saw that you went live earlier, but I was also going live. Wait, you were doing your Dragon Quest VII speedrun? You're probably not even hearing. Me and Tharwi. Me and Thari. Oh my god. I kind of forgot. Oh no, not for another month. Just learning it now. And wait. Since you were last playing Dragon Quest VII, my bot's lying to everyone. Kevin we're quoting a Poshul from Chrono Cross, the little dog thing that talks. It has a hilarious affectation to its voice. Were you streaming Dragon Quest 1 or 2, I mean? Oh, you were playing Dragon Quest 7. Oh. His name's deceptive. It's actually spelled Kevin. You were right the first time. Anyways, the reading is going well. We're getting into an interesting part. If I remember, I think I'm starting to remember this part. Oh my goodness, this gets interesting. So Rostov was counting his officer's money and put it in a bag under his pillow. And now the money's not there. And Rostov is confused about what's happened. Lavrushka rummaged through the whole bed, looked underneath it and under the table, rummaged through the entire room, and then stood still in the middle of it. Dinozov followed Lavrushka's movements in silence, and when Lavrushka spread his hands in amazement to show that it was nowhere to be found, he looked around at Rostov. Rostov, is this one of your ridiculous schoolboy jokes? Rostov could sense Denisov glaring at him. He glanced up and then rapidly down again. All the blood in his body seemed to have been blocked somewhere just below the throat, and it rushed to his face and eyes. He could hardly get his breath. And no one's been in the room. No but the lieutenant and yourselves. It's got to be here somewhere, said Lavrushka. Are we to the part that they made a musical about? The one called Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812? I've heard of this musical, but I've never seen this musical. I've heard of this musical, but I've never seen this musical, so I don't know. But Natasha and Pierre have both appeared already in the book. Pierre has inherited his father's fortune, and Natasha is just a little girl. She's like 13 years old. Well, anyways. You know, she's appropriate marrying age for the early 1800s. Gotta find her husband quick, before she becomes an old maid at 17. I'll check out the musical once I'm done reading the book. It should be interesting. It must be tough to make a musical about this book, but then again, they did Les Miserables. Les Miserables. What's the proper pronunciation of that? Someone correct me. I know you want to. Anyways, where was I? How was the run, by the way? How was the run, Purple Mario? Was it just a playthrough of Dragon Quest VII? Kind of a test run? I mean, Les Miserables. Yeah, Nier Automata. Pretty much very miserable people. All the miserable people. Okay. Anyway. Okay. And no one's been in the room. No but the lieutenant and yourselves. It's got to be here somewhere, said Lavrushka. Wait then, damn you! Move yourself! Find it! Denisov yelled suddenly, turning purple and rushing at the valet with a menacing gesture. Find that purse or I'll have you flogged, the lot of you! You're working through segments of it. It's a long game. Dude, I know. Dragon Quest VII is probably one of the longest games I've ever played. It's so long. It's like never ending. Every once in a while, I pick it back up again and put like another 20 hours into it, and then put it down because I'm just like I'm so tired of this. And then I'll like a year later, I'll pick it back up again and start putting like more hours into it, and then I like put it down and be like, okay, I need to give this a rest. If it had like one engaging, continual plot to it, it kind of does, but it kind of doesn't. If it had something like that that was pulling me in and keeping me, you know, engaged, I would have just finished it right now. I am curious to see someone speedrun it though. Now that would be interesting. That would be interesting to watch. It would be the kind of fun, kind of game a speedrun would be thoroughly engaging of. But anyway. And are you speedrunning the 3DS version or the PlayStation version? What was I gonna say? Studiously avoiding Denisov's eyes, Rostov began buttoning up his jacket, fastening on his sword and putting on his cap. I'm telling you, that pocketbook has got to be here, roared Denisov, shaking the orderly by the shoulders and banging him against the wall. Denisov, leave him alone. I know who's taking it, said Rostov, heading for the door without looking up. Denisov paused, thought for a moment, and seemed to get Rostov's drift. He seized him by the arm. Oh, rubbish, Rostov, he roared, the veins standing out like cords on his neck and forehead. I'm telling you, you're crazy. No, I won't let you. That pocketbook is here somewhere. I'll flay this rogue alive, then it'll turn up. I know who has taken it, repeated Rostov in a tremulous voice, and went to the door. And I'm telling you, don't you dare, cried Denisov, hurtling after the ensign to hold him back. But Rostov freed his arm, looked up straight into his eyes, and glared at Denisov with the kind of fury you reserve for your worst enemy. Do you know what you're saying? He said in a quavering voice. I'm the only person who's been in that room. So if it's not there, you think... Lost for words, he fled from the room. Oh, damn you, and all the rest of you, were the last words Rostov heard. Rostov went over to Telyanin's quarters. The master's not in. He's gone over to HQ, Telyanin's orderly told him. Has something happened? The orderly added, taken aback by the ensign's worried face. No, nothing's happened. You've only just missed him, said the orderly. The headquarters were nearly 2 miles from Saznik. Rostov took his horse and rode there without calling in at his own quarters. In the village which the staff had taken over, there was an inn much frequented by the officers. Rostov went there. Telyanin's horse was at the door. This is kind of like seeing your friend's car in the parking lot of a Publix, or a Ralph's. Or any other grocery store, a Kroger. He just saw his friend's horse parked outside. In the second room, the lieutenant was sitting at a table with a dish of sausage and a bottle of wine before him. Oh, so you've come here too, young man, he said, smiling and raising his eyebrows. Yes, I have. Rostov seemed to force the words out with a great effort. He sat down at the next table. Neither man spoke. There were 2 Germans and a Russian officer in the room. Silence reigned, the only sounds being the scraping of knives on plates and the lieutenant munching away. When Telyanin had finished his meal, he took out a double-sided purse, parted the rings with the curved tips of his tiny white fingers, took out a gold coin, raised his eyebrows, and handed the money to the waiter. I'd be glad if you would hurry, he said. It was a new gold coin. Rostov got up and went over to Telyanin. Please let me look at that purse, he said, his voice barely audible. With shifty eyes and eyebrows still raised, Telyanin handed over the purse. Nice little purse, isn't it? Yes, yes, he said, suddenly turning white. Do have a look at it, young man, he added. Rostov took hold of the purse and examined it, also checking the money inside, and he stared at Telyanin. The lieutenant let his eyes wander around everywhere, as he always did, and suddenly he seemed remarkably cheerful. If we get to Vienna, I suppose I shall leave it all there. But just now there's nothing to buy in these ghastly little places, he said. So let me have it back, young man, and I'll be on my way. Rostov said nothing. What are you going to do then? Are you lunching too? They do a decent meal, Telyanin went on. Please, could I have it back? He put out his hand and took hold of the purse. Rostov let go of it. Telyanin took the purse and casually began to slide it back into his breeches pocket, with his eyebrows still raised and his mouth half open as if to say, Yes, yes, I'm putting my purse in my pocket. That's all there is to it, and nobody's business but mine. Well, young man, he said with a sigh, staring out from under those raised eyebrows for once straight into Rostov's eyes. A strange glint surged like a charge of electricity from Telyanin's eyes to Rostov's and back again, to and fro in a split second. Come over here, said Rostov, grabbing Telyanin by the arm and almost dragging him into the window. That money is Denisov's. You took it, he whispered in his ear. You what? What? How dare you? What do you mean? Said Telyanin. But the words sounded pathetic, almost desperate, a plea for forgiveness. The moment Rostov heard that tone of voice, a great boulder of doubt seemed to fall from him and roll away. He felt a thrill of delight, mixed immediately with some pity for the miserable creature standing before him. But this was something that had to be taken all the way. God knows what these people might think, Telyanin was muttering. He snatched up his cap and went over to a small empty room. We need to talk. Yes, I know we do. I can prove it, said Rostov. Telyanin's terrified face, drained of all the color, now twitched in every muscle, and his eyes darted about everywhere, but only downwards, never coming to the level of Rostov's face. Sobs were pitiful to hear. Count, please don't ruin me. I'm only young. Here's the wretched money. Take it. He threw it down on the table. My father's an old man. Rostov took the money, avoiding Telyanin's eyes, and left the room without a word, but he stopped in the doorway and looked back. My God, he said with tears in his eyes. How could you have done that? Help, said Telyanin, coming nearer. Don't you touch me, said Rostov, backing away. If you're so badly off, keep the money. He flung the purse at him and ran out of the inn. End of chapter. Chapter 5. That same evening in Denisov's quarters, a heated discussion was taking place among some of the squadron officers. But I'm telling you, Rostov, that you're going to have to apologize to the colonel. The words came from a staff captain, a tall man with graying hair, a vast spread of whiskers, bold features, and a deeply furrowed face. Rostov was bright red with excitement. Kirsten, the staff captain in question, had been reduced to the ranks twice for affairs of honor, both times regaining his commission. Why did you do the 2020 celebrate? Here's your bag of coins. 2020 celebrate. I won't let anyone call me a liar, cried Rostov. He said I was lying, and I said he was, and that's it. He can put me on extra duty every day of the week. He can put me under arrest, but no one's going to make me apologize. Because if he thinks that being our colonel means it's beneath his dignity to give me satisfaction, then... Hang on, old fellow, you just listen to me, put in the staff captain in his deep bass voice, calmly smoothing his long whiskers. You tell the CO with officers present that another officer has been stealing. Well, it's not my fault there were other officers around when I spoke. Maybe I shouldn't have spoken while they were there, but I'm no diplomat. That's why I joined the Hussars. I didn't think would be any hair splitting here. And when he calls me a liar, let him give me satisfaction. That's all very well, but nobody thinks you're a coward. That's not the point. Denisov will tell you whether it's even remotely possible for a cadet to challenge his CO. Oh, celebration for a new chapter? Got it. Denisov was biting his mustache and looking rather grim as he listened to the conversation, evidently not wanting to be drawn into it. He shook his head in response to the captain's question. So there you are in the presence of other officers sounding off to the CO about his nasty business, the staff captain persisted. Bogdanich, the colonel, brings you into line. That's not what he did. He said I wasn't telling the truth. Yes, and you said some stupid things for which you must now apologize. Not on your life, shouted Rostov. This is something I never expected from you, said the staff captain with a grave and stern look about him. You won't apologize, but, my good sir, it's not only him, it's the whole regiment, all of us that you've offended. You're completely in the wrong. Listen, if only you'd stopped and thought for a minute, taken a bit of advice about what to do, but no, you had to go and blurt it all out before all the officers. So what's the colonel supposed to do next? Charge the officer and disgrace the whole regiment? Shame the whole regiment because of one cad? Go on, should he do that? I'll tell you what we think. No. Bogdanich was a good fellow. He just told you that what you were saying couldn't be true. It's not very nice, but what else could he do? Listen, old man, you brought this on yourself. And now when people are trying to hush things up a bit, you get on your high horse and refuse to apologize. You want the whole story to come out. You see red because you've been given some extra duty. Well, why can't you just go and apologize to an old and honorable officer? Say what you will about Bogdanich, but he is an honorable and gallant old colonel. But oh no, you feel you've been slighted and you don't mind disgracing the whole regiment. The staff captain's voice became shaky. You, sir, are a new boy in this regiment. You're here today and tomorrow you'll be a nice little adjutant somewhere else. You couldn't care less if people start saying there is thieving among the Pavlograd officers. But we care, don't we, Denisov? Don't we care? Denisov neither moved nor spoke. Now and then his gleaming black eyes settled on Rostov. Your pride means a lot to you, so you won't apologize, continued the staff captain. But we old-timers, we've grown up in this regiment, and please God, we'll die in it. And the honor of our regiment means a lot to us, and Bogdanich knows that. I'll say it does. But this is wrong. It's just wrong. I don't want to offend you, but I always speak plain, and this is wrong. At this, the staff captain got up and turned his back on Rostov. Too damn twoo, shouted Denisov, jumping to his feet. Come on, Rostov, what about it? Rostov, turning red and then white, looked from one to the other. No, gentlemen, no. Please don't think... I see what you mean. You've got me wrong. For the honor of the regiment, Well, listen, I'll show you what. I can honor our callers. Well, anyway, what you say is true. I am in the wrong. His eyes had filled with tears. I'm completely in the wrong. Well, what more do you want? Now you're talking, Count, cried the staff captain, turning around and clapping him on the shoulder with a huge hand. I tell you, shouted Denisov, he's a will man. That's better, Count, repeated the captain, using his title in appreciation of his confession. Go and apologize, Your Excellency. Yes, sir, that's what you must do. Gentlemen, I'll do anything. You won't hear a peep out of me, Rostov went on in a voice of supplication. But I can't apologize, for God's sake. I just can't. Whatever you say. How can I go and apologize like a little boy asking to go unpunished? Denisov laughed. It'll be worse if you don't. Bogdanich has a long memory. He'll make you pay for being awkward, said Kirsten. Good God, I'm not being awkward. I can't describe how it feels. No, I can't do it. Well, it's your decision, said the staff captain. By the way, where's that swine hidden himself? He asked Denisov. He's reported sick. There's an order for him to be struck off tomorrow, said Denisov. Well, he must be ill. There's no other explanation, said the staff captain. Ill or not, he better keep out of my way. I'll kill him, came the bloodthirsty cry from Denisov. In came Zurkov. What are you doing here? Cried the officers, turning to the newcomer. We're going into battle, gentlemen. Mac has surrendered, with his whole army. Nonsense. I've seen him with my own eyes. You've what? Seen Mac alive, with all his limbs intact? Into battle, into battle. Give that man some vodka for bringing news like that. But why have you come? I've been sent back to my regiment because of that devil, Mac. The Austrian general filed a complaint against me. All I did was compliment him on Mac's arrival. Hey, what's wrong with you, Rostov? You look as if you just come out of the bathhouse. Oh, we've had a spot of bother for a couple of days, old man. Then the regimental adjutant came in and confirmed Zurkov's news. They were under marching orders for the next day. Into battle, gentlemen. Well, thank God for that. We've been stuck here long enough. End of chapter. I think I'm going to end the stream there. I've been going for almost 2 hours and quite a long time. 2 hours is long enough reading one book, if you ask me. Some people haven't read 2 hours in their life. Let's see here. What is going on? End of chapter 5. This is getting interesting. I think this has to... All this stuff that's happened with Rostov and the stolen purse has to come back. Keep it up. Is Poshul in the stream now? Is Poshul visiting the stream? Anyway. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it, and for everyone just kind of listening. If you want to catch up on previous chapters, all of the previous War and Peace streams are on my YouTube channel, or you can just watch the VODs here on Twitch. Either way, you can just catch up that way if you're so inclined. And this one will be up next on YouTube probably tomorrow or something. But thank you all so much. You have a wonderful week. Tomorrow night I'll be back with some more Ace Attorney. So, yeah. Okay. Thank you for attending. Thank you for your attending. Next time, whatever that is.